Welcome to Career Conversations, where we go behind the scenes with leaders from across the gambling industry to explore their career journeys, insights, and advice for those looking to grow in the space. Today, I'm joined by Richard Bloch, Head of Social Media at Entain, and a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience in the gambling industry. Richard brings a wealth of knowledge on what it takes to thrive in the social media space. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome, Richard. So it's been a long time since we last met, so chatted. The last time I remember working with you was in 2012, back in the Betfair days when Betfair sponsored Manchester United, the World Series of Poker Europe.
Long time ago. You're making me feel old, but yeah, probably about 15-ish years.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Entain?
Sure. So my name's Richard Bloch. I'm currently head of social for Entain. I joined at the beginning of this year. I'll be managing their organic social across both their brands. So their main two brands, which is Ladbrokes and Coral, and hopefully in time across their other brands such as Party Poker, Foxy Bingo in due course.
How did you get into the gambling industry?
Well, I've always been interested in gambling, even when I was younger. So I started off in sport management, working for a company called Benchmark Sport, who run the Sport Industry Awards. Originally, I thought I wanted to be a sports agent. So I joined an agency that represented footballers, rugby players, athletes, but quickly found out that I was more interested in the marketing side of things, so sponsorship and PR. But I've always had a keen interest in poker. That's where we met on the World Series of Poker Europe. So when an opportunity arose to work at what's now called 888.com, they were looking for people that understood the world of poker. And although it seems quite alien probably to think of it, there weren't many people that understood the world of poker back in 2002, I think it was. And I was lucky to be there and to work with that brand when the poker boom happened in 2003, when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. Everyone wanted to understand how to play it, and I just happened to be in the right time in the right place. So my career really started at 888, and then from then I moved on to, it's been a while because you have to bear with me. I have to try and remember which brands I've been at.
There's Rank, you worked at Betfair, Poker Stars, William Hill.
Yeah, that's right. So I went from 888 to bluesquare.com, where again, I worked on Grosvenor UK Poker Tour when it launched, along with some other people much cleverer than me. And Blue Square doesn't exist, unfortunately, anymore. And then I had the pleasure of meeting you at Betfair, where I spent another 5 years working in PR, working on the launch of the World Series of Poker Europe, but also their sponsorships. You mentioned Man United, but I looked after the Barcelona sponsorship before I changed career slightly from PR to social. So that was quite a development, I guess. It was early days of social media. And thinking back now, it's quite uncommon, but they basically handed the keys to the Betfair Poker Twitter account to me because I understood social media and I was working in the poker department. Now, obviously, most brands have large teams that run organic social or paid social or performance marketing. You know, back in the day, they were quite happy for anyone to have a go. So I ran the Betfair Poker Twitter account.
Yeah.
Hired some very clever and intelligent people. I can't really take too much credit, but even now it's still adopting the same kind of tone of voice to try and stand out in the marketplace. And that's when my passion for social media really started, when I started kind of trying to understand the algorithms, what made content popular. And I realized that I probably should switch from PR, which I wasn't great at, to something that I was still passionate about, which was social media. Still staying in the gambling world, but that's when I made the move from Betfair to Poker Stars. So I actually took a little bit of a career sideways step or even backwards. So I went from being, head of department for international PR at Betfair to, I'm trying to remember what my role was. You've got my CV in front of you. I think it was like account exec for social media at PokerStars, which is, I took a pay cut, but PokerStars at the time were the biggest poker brand. I loved poker. and I love social media. And even though I was in my 30s, it was something I was more passionate about. So I kind of sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And so I worked under really intelligent people at PokerStars, and really that's where my social media career started from. You know, PokerStars at the time had unbelievable sponsorships, which, you know, Ronaldo, both Ronaldos, Neymar, you know, trying to think of the other kind of mega stars that they sponsored. But yeah, it was a joyous time, big budgets. And that's really, you know, where I started my social media career. And then I've moved on to become, you know, head of social for William Hill. Then I went agency side, and now I'm at Entain.
Yeah, you worked at Square in the Air, multi-award winning agency.
Great agency and good to go agency side. So I've been in-house, and Square in the Air is, you know, a really great company that works with multiple brands from blue chip companies all the way down to, you know, smaller companies and startups. So for me, that was a really useful exercise to understand how to work with clients, but also to manage different sizes of budgets and, you know, different objectives, different KPIs. I had a really enjoyable time there, had a fantastic team. And then the opportunity came at Entain, and, you know, they've got their own challenges. And those are the kind of projects that excite me. Poker at the time when I joined wasn't allowed on social media. They had a slight dispute with the Department of Justice. So it meant that they, even though they were very well established, they didn't have a Facebook or an Instagram presence. That was the fun project for me when I joined PokerStars, was to help them start their social media channel. And Entain likewise have got their own challenges that I'm looking forward to trying to solve as well.
Would you say that you prefer kind of working operator side or agency side?
I've mainly worked operator side. I prefer to have kind of tunnel vision. I'm really enjoying my time at Entain so far. They both different brands, the Coral and the Labrix brand, both have their challenges. But for me, it's quite nice to have a singular focus. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my time agency side, but you have to wear numerous hats at different times. It's a lot more, I wouldn't say confusing is probably the wrong word, but it's quite challenging to think on behalf of other brands. Whereas when you're in the brand, living and breathing it every day, it becomes a lot easier to understand what will get the best results for social.
What would you say are your 3 to 5 main KPIs for evaluating success?
It's a good question. And I think it will depend on which brand you're working for. But for me,
Okay.
there's really only one KPI that's important, and that is, well, maybe two: engagement. If your content gets engagement, has a high engagement rate, if you want, everything else will follow. Essentially, you know, if your content's popular, it will get traction. You can help that traction by, you know, putting money behind it or working with influencers or whatever it might be. But ultimately, that should be your guiding principle. So there isn't 3 to 5 KPIs for social.
Okay.
It should always really be create the most compelling content that your social media followers and people that you're trying to put it in front of will enjoy. After that, you know, it's probably impressions, which is reach just for brand awareness. But yeah, if you focus on engagement, the rest is a lot easier to come by.
So when we say engagement, just to clarify, we're talking about comments, likes, clicks,
Shares.
shares, reposts. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, look, that again is interesting because not every engagement is as important as others. You know, there's light engagement, you know, so if I like a post, I'm kind of like shrugging my shoulders and saying, okay, that's quite nice. If I watch a piece of content for however long, again, that's quite good. What we're actually after is what I would call deep engagement, which is where people are commenting and sharing. Because if someone's commenting underneath it, then they're actually having a two-way interaction with the brand. And even better, if you're sharing it, you're basically putting my brand in front of your friends and saying, I really like this. You need to see this. So there are levels, if you like. And what we're really after, what I consider a good social media post, is one that has a healthy amount of likes, but more importantly, has a conversation that's underneath it. So we may say something on the post, and people are continuing that conversation. People are liking the comments underneath it, and people are engaging it in that way. And that is the sign of, you know, a successful post.
Can you share an example of a standout campaign that worked for you?
Well, there's been quite a lot of campaigns that I've worked on that I'm proud of, as you can imagine.
Okay.
There's been some that I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of. it's always a team effort, and I'm certainly, if I talked about one, it wouldn't be, my idea that I've gone and done. It's always in collaboration with other departments or with agencies or with the team members, because you can't do everything on your own. And, any idea that you do have can always be built on. The one which we won an award for at PokerStars was with Ronaldo and Neymar. And it certainly helps when you have the two biggest names in football working in the campaign. It was a really simple idea. And the funny thing is that it wouldn't work now, even though it was amazingly successful. And if I told you the concept and what we did, you'd say that sounds normal. But at the time, it was quite groundbreaking insofar as that we invested a lot of money, obviously sponsoring these two individuals, but we shot everything on mobile phones, which obviously now with our lovely cameras that we have and stuff it makes sense. But back in the day, people were lugging about huge cameras and we wanted it to look authentic. So we basically pitched them against each other and we created a series of videos where they were talking in poker terminology, but effectively competing against each other. So we shot it in Brazil and we shot it in Spain. And as you can imagine, any content that features the two of them was hugely popular. Yeah, it was a great campaign and we won an EGR award for that. And I'm still
Yeah.
chasing that high. I hope to collect a few more awards, hopefully by doing content with Entain. But that was thoroughly enjoyable. I got to go on location. I got to meet, both Ronaldo's as well as Neymar. So yeah, that was the most fun probably.
So, Richard, let's dive into influencer marketing. Do you work with influencers? Are there any challenges or opportunities which you can highlight?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, influencer marketing has been probably part of my thinking and strategy for the last 10 plus years. And I think, yeah, at the moment, we're currently working with multiple influencers across the brands for Entain, working with Big John. I don't know if you aware of him for one of our brands next week for the Grand National, where we've got multiple influencers that help amplify our content to their audiences. We also work with accounts on various social platforms that again will help share our content to their audiences. In terms of challenges, yes, there's lots of restrictions in terms of making people aware that it's a paid for promotion. So if we work with an influencer, we have to highlight in their posts, in their copy, that it's an advert so that people understand that they're not just sharing it, because they think it's great content, which we'd hope they do, but it's because we paid them. So there's various rules and regulations. Likewise, any influencers that we do use need to be compliant. So probably a bit of a dull topic, I'm afraid, for this, for this conversation, but there's various ASA regulations in terms of people being over 25 and the type of content they can and can't publish. So we have a really good compliance team at Entain. We will check their audiences to make sure that the majority of their audience is over 18 or over 25 and that they themselves are of the appropriate age so that we don't influence minors or put our content in front of inappropriate.
Right. What tools would you say you use and why do you choose those tools to use?
Yeah, so we have a tool to check audiences, for example, which is really good and super useful to make sure that we are compliant in everything that we do. In terms of there's loads of social media tools out there, and I'm constantly being sent messages on LinkedIn and via email, social listening tools, which are good to some extent. I think every individual has a preference for one or none. My personal preference, and it doesn't mean to say that I'm right, is that I would prefer to use the platforms to measure the results of any of my campaigns. You can use, Hootsuite, Sprinklers, Sprout Social, etc., to do various things for you. They can schedule content. They can do competitor analysis. Just from my personal experience, none of them are brilliant. I would rather do, and it's a lot harder, but I would rather get the data myself, post natively, and do everything via the platform. The platforms themselves, like X, is much better set up to allow you to, use third-party tools. But the likes of Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn hates social tools, pretty much a closed garden in that respect, but they're all designed to try and encourage you to use the native platforms. And if you were to run the numbers yourself and then use a tool, I've always found there's discrepancies. So as much as it's painful and you have to download spreadsheets and add columns and stuff, I encourage my team to use the native platforms as much as possible.
Interesting. I wasn't expecting that. So let's move on to budget and social media effectiveness. You've worked at different companies with different budget sizes, right? And even now you're working on different brands with different budget sizes. Does having a bigger budget generally correlate with having better results?
Do you want a short or a long answer, Crystal? Yes. Yeah, it will always help. I think the more assets you have to play around with, and that's not necessarily budgets, but that's ambassadors and sponsorships, the easier and the better results you're going to get. So I don't want to keep on referring back to my PokerStars days, but if you have Cristiano Ronaldo, who is the biggest person on social media, of course, if he's sharing your content, that's going to be massively beneficial. Likewise, the bigger your budget, the bigger promotional spend that you can put behind your content. But you have to have the right idea and you have to have the right social content, because I could have the biggest budget in the world. If I don't create good social content, I'm just pushing mud up a hill. You know what I mean? I'm putting content in front of people. And like I said, when we talked about the best KPI, if it's not engaging content, I'm going to struggle. And if anything, that will damage the reputation of the brand, because it will annoy people, because I'm putting content that people don't want to see and don't like in front of them. And it will cost me more and more to do it. So I know that's the slightly longer answer, but budgets help. But ultimately, you still have to have creative, engaging, authentic content for it to work.
Okay. So how do you go about coming up with engaging content?
I have daily meetings with my team, because effectively there's multiple layers of content, and I don't want to get too granular in this call, but there's daily content, which is like reacting to the news, and then there's hero content, which is around your sponsorships and ambassadors. So we have a call every day to discuss long range planning content. So we would be talking about Champions League final, or teams that we sponsor potentially winning the league, or jockeys that potentially might win, titles, where we have more time to create the content, but we have to work with other departments. So the budgets will be bigger, the time frames will be longer, but we also have daily content, which is what happened yesterday in the football, what's going to happen, what are we talking about this weekend, for example, in the FA Cup. So there's different layers of different content. Some of them require more planning than others, and so from a planning perspective, we're always working at two different speeds, if that makes sense. The kind of daily heartbeat content interspersed with these kind of bigger tier one hero campaigns.
Sponsorship costs a lot of money. How do you measure the ROI on that? How do you go about it? Because it's not just on you, right? It's on a lot of other departments.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's the $1 million question, if you like, because a lot of it, when if we take a step back, first of all, deciding on what you sponsor and who you sponsor and whether they're appropriate for the brand is based on insights to some degree. But then someone is going to turn around in 3 months, 6 months time that's written the check, and, is fairer than to say, so how are we doing, and has it been worth it? And that is where, measurement companies come in, people like Nielsen, for example, that can measure how many people have seen your advert, how many people have seen your billboards, etc. When it comes to organic social, it's a lot harder. It's one of I don't want to say it's a negative, but it's other people have the benefit of being able to say, we've spent this much money and we've got this much results for it. There are certain areas of the business that struggle to be able to show the financial benefits of what they do. So things like sponsorship, you can measure the amount of seconds you're on TV, you're on billboards. PR, you can kind of talk about how many people have seen the content. Social is hard. We can show you the number of impressions. We can show you the number of engagements. It's very difficult to show the conversion of that into results. So I've not found the answer yet in 15 years, but what we can do is we can work with insights and we can include it in surveys and brand trackers. So we can ask, we can find out the value of our customers that follow us and don't follow us. We can find out the retention rates, the share of wallet, share of voice, all of those kind of things. And although they're soft metrics, everywhere I've worked, without giving away details, we've been able to prove that someone who follows and interacts with our social media is a better quality customer, who will churn less and is more likely to bet with us. And that should be enough to encourage people to invest in social media. But, like I said, other departments have the benefit of being able to show number of deposits and number of bets placed. We don't have that, unfortunately, in social. And if you were to judge us by that, we wouldn't get the investment. So, I mean, you shouldn't really measure social media. Otherwise, if you were being measured in terms of number of bets placed, for example, you would change all of your content and it wouldn't be engaged. You'd be doing the opposite of what you should be doing on social. There are other channels, such as paid social, performance marketing, that should be designed to encourage new customers or retention. Our job is to engage, inform, and to educate where necessary. Our social
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Richard. Let's talk about crisis management. Can you describe a challenging social media crisis that you've managed?
What a fun topic. Yeah. I mean, let's start off with there's always going to be a crisis in social media. Like you can't post. We aim Entain to post this year something like 10,000 pieces of content. My whole team have gone through training, ASA training, compliance. We're fully aware of what we can and can't do. But I've no doubt that one post will accidentally slip through the net. It's, you take enough shots at goal and something's going to slip through the goalkeeper's legs at some point. So we can prepare and be trained as much as we like, but there will be an instance when something happens. And that's where you have to be prepared and reactive. So even if we took it down, people probably screenshot these things. We're going to have to react to it quickly. So we hope that everything we post will be fun and engaging and no one will react to. But, the internet and social media is full of people that are looking to try and bait brands, and they're fairly negative, especially on certain platforms. So it will happen. I can't give any specific instances, but there's been multiple times where we've had to, delete a post. Or what I would say is we don't react to things because people will, like in the horse racing world, people will try and, you'll get animal rights activists posting on your posts, even though the content has nothing to do with it. You'll get people that are opposed to gambling that might post underneath your content. We would never engage with those people. Doesn't mean to say whether they're right or wrong. They just have a different opinion to us. So we try not to court controversy and we try not to make mistakes, but inevitably we can't stop people having their own opinions. And likewise, we can't post as much as we do and not expect there to be something that slips through the net. So I try and minimize it as much as possible. But we certainly don't engage with people that don't agree with our opinion. Otherwise, it'll just snowball. So yeah, we're not perfect.
Yeah. I mean, no brands are perfect at the end of the day. So, okay, let's talk about frameworks and processes. Let's say that someone was just starting as a social media manager for a new casino brand, right? What's the most important piece of advice that you'd give them regarding setting up their social media presence effectively from day one?
Wow. Well, look, I've not done that for a while, but it's probably the basics, right? So first and foremost, you need to have a brand. So you need to find the right handle. People get obsessed with brand names and handles. It's not massively important, but you need to find one. You need to create a brand look and feel that's consistent. So avatars, cover photos, bios that are compliant, and make sure you're set up in the right way across all the different platforms so that if someone was to go to X or to Facebook or to Instagram or YouTube, that they will be able to discover your brand easily and it would look coherent across all of the brands. The next thing is to, very boring. You've got to write a strategy and a plan. Before you start, you need to understand how often you're going to post on each of the platforms, what your tone of voice is, what your look and feel is. If it's one individual, it's probably less important. But, I have a team of 4 to 6 people at Entain. You shouldn't be able to distinguish between who's writing posts on each of the platforms. As a consumer, when you see a feed, Someone like Paddy Power has 30 plus people in their team, but you don't know when a specific person is on shift or off shift because they have a unified tone of voice that they talk. And likewise at Entain, we have something similar. So you shouldn't be able to tell if someone's an expert in some sport or if one person is funnier than the other. It should look and feel the same. So as boring as it is, before you start, you need to have a plan. You need to decide how often you're going to post, which sports. I mean, I know you said casino, so it's how often are you going to, yeah, how often are you going to be commercial? How often are you going to be engaging and stick to it? Because people, I mean, followings are less important now than they were, but people follow brands or and expect to see authentic, consistent content every time they go on there. So you can't be funny one day and then informative another day and a commercial another day. You need to be coherent and consistent from day one. It's less important when you have no following because you're not really talking to many people. But as you grow, you need to have a distinctive plan about how often and how little you're going to talk about certain things. So one of the first things I did when I joined Entain was to write a social media strategy for both brands that clearly mapped out who we are, how we speak, how often we talk about various things, and our ways and behaviors across all of the different social platforms. Once you have that, you know, if a new person is joining and starting up a channel and they hire someone else, that's their guidebook that they can give to them on day one and say, look, I know you're new. You probably looked at our feed, but this is why we do the things and how we speak publicly. And then that can get passed on. You have to tweak it. A strategy isn't a one-off document. It's a constant, you know, the algorithms are changing, brands change, look and feel. It's a constantly evolving document, but boring answer, I'm afraid, but day one, write a strategy. And look, you can look it up what all the different components are that you need to do, and it can be as long or as short as you want, but it should be something that you can hand to anyone in the marketing department. And obviously, when I did mine, I had to get sign off from the brand team, from the trading, you know, various other people so that they understood this is what I plan to do. Are you okay with it? So you should be able to give it to anyone and they should be able to recreate what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. I did mention casino, but actually now in hindsight, I'm thinking that usually, like most of the companies that I've worked with on their socials, they always start with sports.
So sport's a lot easier because there's a natural community already that exists around sport. You know, there's multiple fixtures every day around horse racing, around football. It tends to be it's a lot harder to start a social channel for a casino. People don't naturally engage and communicate as much as a brand might tell you that they're fun or social. You will very rarely find people playing blackjack talking to each other. Different brands have different approaches, you know, and I don't want to name drop particular brands, but some people have dedicated channels. Other people will use their sports community to talk occasionally to a casino audience or a gaming audience. So that's one of the decisions that I need to make. You know, at various companies where I've worked, we've had separate horse racing channels, for example, because, you know, it's a different community that, although they might be interested in other sports, have, you know, a fairly dedicated following. So when you say, how do you talk to different audiences, I think a lot of it will do with targeting. So you may post content and then you might boost it to specific interest groups, but it's a decision that every brand needs to make. You can either have it within the sports community, which is vibrant and easy to manage, or you might choose to have a separate channel for gaming and casino.
Okay. Hiring for social teams, what type of people you like to work with and who you would consider a red flag, you know, during the interview process? Or maybe you could tell from the CV.
I wish I could tell from a CV. No, you can't tell from a CV. I think it's a good question because I've just hired two people that started this week. So I can tell you about my recent hires who are excellent. Thank goodness. But a CV doesn't really tell you much. A CV, anyone can write a good CV. It starts with a CV. So they need to have in their CV writing experience and hopefully social media experience. But I've hired people that have never done social media before. So the key thing is to make sure that in a personal capacity, they're interested in social media. Most people are. So that doesn't really narrow it down too much. So the people that I've just recently hired, what I've done for maybe the last 5 to 10 years, they have to do a task that involves writing content, and you have to give them a real life example of whatever you're interested or you want to know. Most social channels rely on football as the primary driver of engagement. So we will give them a hypothetical football match and say to them, write me a tweet, write me a Facebook post, write me an Instagram post about a hypothetical match that's happening next weekend where this and this happens. And then they send it back to you. If they can't write and they can't spell, and I can teach people about the regulations. That's not hard because that is quite specific to gambling. That's not a problem. But if I'm having to worry about people not being able to spell, then we've got problems because I can't be spell checking every post that they do. So they need to have good English, good grammar. They normally need to be considerably younger than me, because that's the other thing, is that, we're trying to appeal to not a disproportionately young audience, but an appropriate audience that is, let's say, 25 to 35. So I need someone in that age bracket, because if I was to post, for example, it would probably appeal to my age group, which is not the audience that I'm looking to attract. So I think they need to have a good sports knowledge, good grammar, good English, and then it's down to the interview process after that. They need to be excited. And it sounds obvious, but not everyone is. They need to be excited about the prospect of creating good quality content. And I'm not going to say it's unique to social media people, but I need them to have the same passion that I do for social media, which is, if I post, I don't post in a personal capacity anymore, but when we post as a brand, I'm constantly on the feed seeing how many people have liked it. Why did that post work? Why didn't that post? So they need to have an inquisitive mind and be passionate about social. Once that happens, what you don't know ever from an interview is how hardworking someone is. So that's the element of jeopardy when you hire someone, is that you hope that what you've seen in a CV, what you've seen in the interview stage translates, and that they're hardworking. But yeah, that's what I do when I hire people.
What about red flags?
Red flags. Yeah, I mean, it's often a miscommunication of what they think the role is compared to what it actually is. So,
Okay.
there's nothing really like red flag, it doesn't matter what they look like, how they talk. If they're proficient, I'm happy with them. It's if they have a misalignment. So if they think they're coming in and that they're going to be going to football matches and attending horse racing, or that would be a red flag to me, because, 75% of your job will be, working with me in an office. We do get to do lots of fun things. Don't get me wrong. My team do get to go to events, going to, Wembley in a couple of weeks' time for a cup final for one of the teams we sponsor. One of my team is going to play on the pitch at Liverpool. But if they think that this is, happening every week, then we've probably got a problem, because they're not going to be happy in the role. So I wouldn't say I have many red flags, because normally the interview question and response gets rid of the people that I think would be bad. But if they think they're going to be doing something different to what the job actually is, we're probably not meant for each other.
Emerging trends. Can you mention 3 or 5?
Okay. It's very difficult not to not answer your question, but the world of social media, like, for a start, if you want to get into social media, there are trends that change all the time. So whether it's boring things like regulations, I shouldn't call them boring, necessary evils like regulation, they're going to change. ASA is going to change their rules and regulation of how we work. There are what I would call like mega trends, right? So rather than looking at the small things that might change, there are some things that won't change that you need to probably jump on board with. So the world of social media is only going to get bigger. What platforms emerge, nobody knows. AI is going to probably influence our world quite drastically, whether that is in the form of generated imagery or videos. I expect that to have an impact massively in the next 5 to 10 years. The world of influencers, which we talked about, is not going to go away. Is only going to get bigger. So there are trends, but I wouldn't worry about the small things. The Facebook is probably going to change some small thing in its platform, or Instagram will offer something else. I think if you're interested in social media, focus on the big things, the things that won't change, the things that will only get bigger. Because over the 10, 15 years that I've worked in the industry, I've been told lots of things that are a bit silly, like long form is dead. It isn't. It's just, things go away and come back in different forms and guises, but there are some things that will never change and only get bigger. I'm lucky, and that's probably why I moved from PR to social media. I quickly understood, however long ago it was, that social media is here to stay. It's going to be huge. So really you need to pay attention to the big things rather than the little things, because every 6 months something happens. Elon Musk massively changed X, but the platform itself has remained pretty much the same. You need to focus on things that are going to massively influence the world of social media rather than the small things. I think that's the same in life, really. Pay attention
Yeah.
to the things. Don't worry about the small things. Trends are exactly that. They're like micro shifts, and it's much more important to focus on what is going to influence social media long term rather than short term.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say definitely AI, right? Because it can help you with your content, imagery, like you said, video creation.
Coming to take my job. No, I wouldn't worry. Like people always say that, it's going to replace social media, man. I don't think that's true. I think it's what our job is in social media is to understand how it works and how it can help us. Thankfully, no one can quite write a tweet like a person yet. So I'm not going to just get ChatGPT to write my content or Midjourney to create assets, but I do think that it will save us time and we will all start using it in some capacity in the next few years.
Okay. So you don't use ChatGPT to help you with your content?
No, is the simple answer, because it doesn't sound, at the moment, it can't write a tweet that engages people. It can give you a list. I did actually a tweet the other day, or a Facebook post the other day, that asked about, we asked ChatGPT the 10 most passionate fan bases. It can give you a list, and it can give you a list that makes sense with credible reasons behind it. Why is Liverpool so popular and so vibrant fan community? But it's been written by ChatGPT. Until it can give you an indistinguishable tweet. And also, it's at the moment, it doesn't have humor wrapped into it. So it can give you an informative answer. You could maybe run a channel that doesn't need it, but that's the thing about social. To engage with people, you have to speak at a human level. You have to understand, UK humor if you're speaking to a UK customer, football slang. You have to understand memes. You have to understand, how people talk. I'm pretty sure if ChatGPT was at a bar, you would know straight away and not be that interested. So at the moment, it's not there. It might be very soon.
Do you have any parting advice or any job tips for social media marketers who are looking to break into the gambling industry?
I don't want to give them too many tips because I'm probably competing against them, right? So I think it's probably to be authentic and consistent in whatever you do, whether it's content or just your general approach. I think people understand when you are being authentic and when you're not. All of your content needs to have that at its heart. And I think if you get that right and you understand how to engage with people, your content will be successful. So I guess that's probably the tip that I would give people. And it sounds easy, but it's often not done. So you just need to be authentic and consistent in all of your content.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been good to speak to you. Thank you.
Okay, see you then. Have a nice evening.
Take care.